Welcome back to another class on the treasures of Mishnayot. We are continuing in Masechet Berachot in Perek Bet, Mishnah Aleph. This will be part 3 and the final shiur for this Mishnah. Let's start for one more time from the top and we'll go straight into the next chapter where we are heading. Hayakore b'Torah, if a person was reciting in the Torah the Parshiyot of Shema, V'giya zman hamikra, and then the time for reading of the Shema came, and right now he's in the middle of the reading of the Sefer Torah, and now he reached the section where it says Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and V'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha, etc. Im kiven libo, if he had kavanah in his heart. We had part 2 just was done for what means kavanah. We're not going to go over the whole thing. You want to listen to part 2, you'll understand it better. Im kiven libo, if a person had kavanah, letzet yedei chovat kriyat Shema, to fulfill his obligation in reciting the kriyat Shema at that moment when he was reading from the Torah, yatsa, he fulfills his obligation. V'im lav, and if he did not have kavanah at the time when he was reciting the kriyat Shema, he didn't have kavanah to fulfill his obligation, that with the reciting that he's doing of the Shema from the Sefer Torah, if he didn't have kavanah to fulfill his obligation in the reciting of the Shema for that day, lo yatsa, he does not fulfill his obligation. Now we're moving to the next piece. The Mishnah continues and he says, Bapirakim, and this is what we said we're going to start, Bezrat Hashem, getting into. Let me just try to get a sitter. We're going to see today, Bezrat Hashem, where is a person allowed to interrupt. I'll just tell you off the back that the Mishnah says today we don't have this minhag, but even though the Shulchan Aruch says to do it, you're allowed to do it, it's actual halakha in the Shulchan Aruch, nevertheless the Mishnah says that nowadays we don't do this, what we're about to learn today. So when we look into Shema, we know that there are 2 berachot before Shema in the morning, and there's 1 bracha after Shema. And the same thing, you're going to have 2 berachot before Shema in the evening, and 2 berachot after Shema in the evening. Now what we're going to want to see today is for who are you allowed to interrupt. Let me just find it right over here. So once you begin the blessings of the berachot of Kriyat Shema, right, you begin the blessing of Yoter or Uverech Choshech, until you get over here, until Baruch Atah Hashem Yoter HaMeorot, it's considered still to be 1 paragraph. Then Ahavat Olam begins. Now, whatever I say for this, and whatever I'm going to show you for Shema, will apply the same thing to the brachot of the Kriyat Shema and the Shema itself in the Aravit prayer. So we're going to see over here, basically, whenever we're going to say between the Perakim, it's going to mean between the blessings. For example, if you said Baruch Atah Hashem Yoter HaMeorot, and before you began Ahavat Olam, in between here is called between the chapters. Okay? When it comes to the Shema part, when it says Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad V'ahavta v'chulu v'chulu, right, and you say Uchtavtam al mizdozo betechu v'shorecha, before you begin Vayam Shemoah, this is considered to be in between the paragraphs. Same thing over here, right? If you say Lama'an yirbu yimichem yimibrechem al adam asher nishba Hashem la'avatem l'talem kimi Hashem al ha'aretz, before you begin the Vayomer, that's considered to be in between the paragraph. And so on and so forth. This is what's considered to be in between the paragraph, is when you finish that complete paragraph, before you begin the new paragraph, that's considered to be in between the paragraph. What is considered to be be'emtza? What's considered to be in the middle of the blessing or in the middle of the Kriyat Shema? So right over here, if a person is saying, let's say you're saying Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Olam, Yoter Or Uverech Choshech, and so on and so forth, Oseh Shalom V'Red HaKol, now, as we'll see, your father walks in, or a rabbi walks in. So we'll see, Rabotai, what's going to be the halachot when you are in the middle of the berachot themselves, or if you are in the middle of Shema itself. You began saying V'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavecha v'chol amshecha v'chol miyodecha v'hayu, before you begin V'hayu, or even if you began the words V'hayu advarim ha'ele, your father walked in. So one more time, Rabotai, all I'm saying is that you have in between the paragraphs and you have inside the paragraphs, okay? So sometimes it could be, it doesn't matter, it could be inside the Berachot itself, or it could be inside the reciting of the Shema itself. That's going to be called, we'll see, it's going to be Be'emta HaPerek. But whenever we're going to say Ben HaPerakim, between the paragraph, it literally means when you finish that whole section, like I explained. So let's start. It says like this: Beperakim, between the chapters, Beperke Kri Shema Berchotecha, whether you're dealing with the chapters that are between the Kri Shema or the Berachot, like I explained, not in the middle of the Beracha, not in the middle of the Kri Shema, in between the paragraphs. Kemevu'ar lahalam b'Mishnah Bet. Okay, he says already it's going to be explained later on in Mishnah Bet. So what is a person allowed to do? Beperakim. What is a person allowed to do when he is in between the paragraphs? Shoel, he says like this: you're allowed to go ahead and you're allowed to inquire. You're allowed to go ahead and ask about the person's well-being. He says like this: Hakore et Shema shoel b'shalom adam. A person that is reciting Shema, you are allowed to go ahead and you're allowed to ask the well-being of a person mipnei hakavod, because of honor. Meaning to say, kishehu ro'eh adam shu chayav lichbado, if you see a person that you are obligated to honor him, kigon, for example, aviv, his father, or rabo, or his rabbi, or mishu gadol mimenu b'chochma, or somebody who's greater than him in chochma, in Torah, in wisdom of Torah. This is brought down from the Rambam. So it comes out over here. By the way, we'll see that the words are the words of Rabbi Meir. So basically, what is Rabbi Meir saying right now? He says, "Beperakim shoel mipnei hakavod." When you are in between the sections, whether it's going to be the Berachot section or whether it's going to be the Kriya Shema section, when you are in between the sections, you're allowed to ask about a person's well-being mipnei hakavod, because of honor. Like we explained, if he's your father, your rabbi, somebody that is greater than you in Torah wisdom, you're allowed to ask, you're allowed to stop right over there, and you're allowed to, meaning between the paragraphs, and you're allowed to send him a well-being regard. How are you? How's everything doing? And so on and so forth. You are allowed to go ahead and interrupt in between the paragraphs. Continues the Kahat and he says, Umeshiv. Right? The Mishnah says, and you are also allowed to go ahead and reply back. He says, he brings this down the opinion of the Gemara. And needless to say that you are allowed to go ahead and reply shalom because of honor. That means, let's just, let's just say the bracha of Yitzer or Havat Olam, or let's say I'm in the middle of, I just finishing the paragraph of V'ahavta. Before I begin the paragraph of V'hayam Shemoah, that's called in between the paragraphs. My father comes to me, my rabbi comes to me, somebody who's greater in Torah knowledge comes to me, and they say, how are you? I'm in the middle of that, I'm about to begin V'hayam Shemoah. I'm allowed to answer back, I'm allowed to reply and say, I'm fine, and yourself, how are you? So you're allowed to go ahead and return a greeting to somebody who asks you about your well-being. So we see over here, Beperakim shoel mipnei hakavod umeshiv. When you're in between the paragraphs, you're allowed to ask about a person's well-being, if it's an honorable person, and you're allowed to reply to an honorable person. All this is between the paragraphs. What happens now? We're using the word ube'emta. What happens if you are in the middle of the paragraph? Haparasha or haparacha, whether it's going to be in the middle of the Kriyat Shema itself, or whether you're going to be in the middle of the blessing of the Shema itself. You began, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech olam, yoter or uvurei choshech. You're in the middle. Ve'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavecha b'chol nafshecha b'chol miyodecha. You are in the middle of the paragraph. What are going to be the laws over there? Shoel mipnei ha'yirah. You are allowed to ask a person's well-being if you are afraid of him. The Kahati explains, כשהוא רואה אדם שהוא יראה מפניו שמא יענשנו, כגון שליט, if you see a person that you are afraid of him because maybe he can punish you, for example, a ruler, mutar lo lish'ol b'shlomo, you're allowed to go ahead and ask him about his well-being. Courtesy. You listen, you're in the middle of the house, it's not Shemna Esrei. Listen, you never know these people. So if you see a person, angry person walks in, he can, if you're not going to say hi to him right now, he could damage you, chas v'shalom. By the way, that's halakha. But this is halakha. You're allowed to go ahead and ask him, listen, how are you? How's everything? You're allowed to ask him about his well-being. Umeshiv, and you're allowed to even reply. Needless to say, that you're allowed to reply back to such a person if this mean person asks you about your well-being. You're allowed to reply and say, I'm fine, and yourself? How are you doing? Right? You're allowed to go ahead and reply. So we have over here like this, Rabotai. We have over here, Ube'emta sho'el mipnahira umeshiv, when you are in the middle of the paragraph of Shema, or if you're in the middle of the blessings itself, you're allowed to go ahead and ask about the person's well-being when we are afraid of him. And you're allowed to reply to the person when you are afraid of him. Aval, however, he says, Eino sho'el ve'af eino meshiv mipnei hakavod. But what happens if you are in the middle of the paragraph of Shema, or in the middle of the berachot itself? Now you have your father, your rabbi, somebody who's greater than you in Torah knowledge. They come and they ask you, how are you doing? Or can you even send them that warm feeling regards? Absolutely not. Diri Rabbi Meir, these are the words of Rabbi Meir. She'enu mavdil ben sho'el u'meshiv. Rabbi Meir makes no difference when it comes to requesting about a person's well-being to replying to a person that asks you about your well-being. That means to say, according to Rabbi Meir, it's very simple. Whenever he says Biperakim in between the chapters, whoever you are allowed to ask about their well-being, that is the person you're allowed to reply. When you're in the middle of the chapter or in the middle of the brachot, whoever you are allowed to ask about their well-being, you are allowed to go ahead and reply to that same person. So, Biperakim sho'el mipnei hakavod umeshiv. Be'emtza sho'el mipnei hayir umeshiv. So we see clearly over here that according to Rabbi Meir, he's sticking to that form. Whoever I'm allowed to ask about their well-being, that is the person I'm allowed to go ahead and reply back. Nobody else. You'll see the difference with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. All this that I just said was the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda has a different, he has a twist, a little bit twist to the learning, to the teaching. Rabbi Yehuda says, Be'emta, if you are in the middle of the paragraph, or if you're in the middle of the berachot, you're allowed to ask the person about his well-being if you are afraid of him. Like we saw in the words of Rabbi Meir. This is what Rabbi Yehuda adds that Rabbi Meir didn't allow you to do. Rabbi Meir said, whoever you are asking his well-being about, that's the same person you're going to go ahead and reply back, which is the only person who you are afraid of. Rabbi Yehuda says, no. In the middle, I'm allowing you to ask about a person's well-being that you are afraid of, and you're allowed and you're allowed to reply back to somebody that is honorable. That means, if I'm in the middle of the brach of Yoter Or Ahavat Olam, I just began, and my father or my rabbi or somebody that's greater than me in Torah knowledge comes and asks me, how are you? I have an obligation to answer them and say, I am fine, and yourself. I'm allowed to answer. This is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Koloimer, he says here, Gam mipnei hakavod. The Kahati says, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you also have to be able to reply because of somebody that is honorable. She'im adam shu chayav b'chivado higdim lo shalom, harei hu meshiv lo shalom, afilu be'emsa parsha or be'emsa bracha. That if the person that you are obligated to honor him preceded with a hello to you, you are obligated, he said, to go ahead and reply back hello to him, even in the middle of the parsha or in the middle of the berachot. All this is according to Rabbi Yehuda when you are in the emta. What about Perek? Also, he disagrees with Rabbi Meir when you are in between the paragraph or in between the berachot. So he says, Beperakim, ben parsha leparsha, ben bracha lebracha, shel shema berchatecha. Whether you're going to be between the parshiyot, say you finish the paragraph of Ahavta, and now you're going to begin the next paragraph of V'hayim Shemoah, or you finish V'hayim Shemoah, and now you're going to begin Vayomer. That's called in between the paragraphs, or the bracha to bracha, or if you are you're in between the paragraphs of the berachot. You finish Yotzer HaMeorot, and now you're continuing to Ahavat Olam. In between the paragraphs of Shema or the berachot, Rabbi Yehuda holds Sho'el Mipunei HaKavod, like we saw in the opinion of Rabbi Meir, Kimoshe Ba'arun L'Malo, like it was explained above, that if an honorable person, you see your father passing by you, and you are in between the paragraphs, ask him, how are you doing, Abba? But he asked, here's the twist, Umeshiv Shalom L'chol Adam, and you reply back the Shalom to every single person. Shisha'al B'Shalom, that asks you about your well-being. Here's the twist. According to Rabbi Meir, I'm only allowed to answer back, I'm allowed to only reply back to somebody that is honorable. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he says, any person. One more time. Umeshiv Shalom L'chol Adam, and you're going to reply Shalom to any single person. Shisha'al B'Shalom, that asks you about your well-being. Koloimor. Right. Sheberecho B'Berkat Shalom. Okay. The Kati says, Halacha ki Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, that whenever you are be'emta haperik or be'emta beracha, we're going to tell you, you're allowed to go ahead and ask about a person's well-being if you are afraid of them. You're afraid they might hurt you. But you're allowed to reply only to a person that's honorable, like your father, your rabbi, or somebody that is greater in Torah knowledge. But when it comes to in between the paragraphs, we're going to allow you to ask about a person's well-being if he's honorable, and you're allowed to reply to every single person that asks you about your well-being. You're allowed to reply back to these kind of people. He says over here, Yesh Mefarshim, there are those that want to go ahead and explain, what does it mean Mipnei Hayira? What does it mean Mipnei Hayira? You're allowed to go ahead and ask about a person's well-being because of fear. In the Kahati, we said because of somebody that's going to punish you. For example, a ruler, a king, an angry man, a person who's not normal, I don't know. But over here he says you can learn Mipnei Hayira like this. Kegon aviv or raboshu chayav b'moro'o. I could also learn the word Mipnei Hayira means not a ruler that's going to punish you. That's self-understood. Your life is on the line. He wants to say, what does it mean Mipnei Hayira? For example, your father and your rabbi, where you are obligated to fear them. Harosh v'harashba, he brings his opinion down in the two Rishonim, the Rosh and the Rashba. So according to the Rosh and the Rashba, if a person is in the middle of the paragraph of Shema, or he's in the middle of the berachot, he's allowed, and he sees his father or his rabbi, he's allowed to ask them about their well-being. How are you going to learn Mipnei HaKavod? When it says because of honor, Ainu Adam Nichbad, Shera'u Lachdim Lo Shalom. Very simple. An honorable person doesn't have to be your father or your rabbi. It has to be an honorable person that, is proper for us to give him Shalom. He says, Rashi V'rov Mefarshei HaMishnah. Rashi brings his understanding, and also a lot of the explanations of the ones that explain on the Mishnah. B'chol makom sheniskar b'Mishnah Rabbi Yehuda Stam, hu Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai. Any place where you see in the Mishnah says Rabbi Yehuda without saying the son of who, you have to understand that it's Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Ilai. So we have over here, Rabotai, that these Mefarshim want to learn Mipnei Hayira, which means your father and your rabbi, because you are obligated to fear them, and that's brought down in the name of the Rosh and the Rashba. Mipnei Kavod, what does that mean, Mipnei Kavod? Haynu Adam Nichbad, an honorable person, who's not even your father or your rabbi. It could be another person that's honorable. But it cannot be any regular person. It has to be an honorable person. According to them, they say, that it's fit for you to go ahead and give him shalom. I don't know. He's the president of the shul. Maybe he's a board member. Maybe he's a CEO of a company. I don't know. Somebody that is honorable that you have to go ahead and you have to give him that proper